that was once just the stuff of fiction? Well, we're gonna explore a book that made some seriously mind-boggling predictions about this year. Predictions that might just give you chills. We're talking about George Orwell's 1984, that iconic dystopian novel that's been lauded as a visionary work, foreseeing the rise of totalitarian control and mass surveillance. And believe it or not, some of its predictions for the world we live in are downright shocking. Are you excited yet? Then buckle up, because we're about to go on a journey that will shake your perception of reality to the core. Prediction 1. The rise of mass surveillance. Raise your hand if you've ever felt like you were being watched. No, I'm not talking about that creepy guy at the bar giving you the side eye. I'm talking about the very real, very unsettling feeling that someone or something is always watching your every move. Maybe it's just a lingering sense of paranoia, or maybe, just maybe, your intuition is onto something. In George Orwell's iconic novel 1984, he introduced a concept that might just make your hairs on the back of your neck stand up. He called it the telescreen, an omnipresent device that could not only broadcast propaganda and messages, but also constantly monitor the actions, movements, and even the psychological responses of every single citizen. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's just a dystopian fiction, right? Surely we're not living in that kind of nightmarish reality? Well, buckle up, because the truth might just give you chills. We live in a world where mass surveillance has become the norm. Everywhere you go, from the grocery store to the local park, there are prying eyes watching your every move. CCTV cameras equipped with cutting-edge facial recognition software track and analyze your face, your gait, and your behavior patterns. And it's not just a momentary glance either. This technology can follow you from one camera to the next, creating a seamless map of your daily life. But it doesn't stop there. Thanks to the ubiquity of smartphones and smart devices, our digital footprints are being constantly monitored and analyzed by governments and corporations alike. Every click, every search, every conversation is being scrutinized for potential threats or valuable data. And if you think this level of surveillance is reserved for just a select few, think again. Just look at the Uyghur Muslim community in China, an entire ethnic group that has been subjected to intense persecution and oppression, all under the guise of security and enabled by this very same invasive technology. But here's where things start to get really shocking. Prediction 2, the power of language manipulation. Have you ever stopped to think about the way we communicate? The words we use, the phrases we've become so accustomed to using without a second thought. It's one of those things that we often take for granted, right? We just open our mouths and let the words flow, rarely pausing to consider the deeper meanings or implications. But what if I told you that the very language we use is being systematically manipulated to control our thoughts and shape our perception of reality itself? Sounds like something straight out of a dystopian novel, right? Well, brace yourself, because that's exactly what George Orwell warned us about in his classic work 1984. In this chilling portrayal of a totalitarian society, Orwell introduced the concept of newspeak, a controlled language designed to limit independent thought and free expression. The idea was brilliant in its simplicity, yet utterly terrifying in its implications. By carefully crafting the vocabulary and phrases used by the masses, those in power could effectively program the way people perceived and understood the world around them. Think about it. By removing certain words and redefining others, they could quite literally make entire concepts unthinkable. Dissent, freedom, individuality, all of these ideas could be erased from the collective consciousness simply by making it impossible to articulate them. But it gets even more interesting than this. Prediction 3, perpetual warfare. Raise your hand if you can remember a time when our country wasn't involved in some kind of a military conflict. Yeah, me neither. In Orwell's Oceania, the ruling party kept the population in a constant state of war, not only to maintain control but also to justify economic hardship and the suppression of civil liberties. Sound familiar? For decades, we've been embroiled in conflicts across the globe, with one war seemingly leading to another, and while the reasons may vary, the results are often the same. A population kept in check through the guise of national security, with dissenting voices silenced in the name of patriotism. But at what point do we stop and ask ourselves, is this necessary? Or are we being played like pawns in a game of power and control? So let's take a pause for a moment, because things are about to get truly unbelievable. Prediction 4, the distraction of mass entertainment. Alright, be honest with me here. How much time did you spend mindlessly scrolling through social media or binging on Netflix this week? I'm guilty of it too, trust me. But have you ever stopped to think about why we're so drawn to these endless sources of entertainment and distraction? In 1984, Orwell suggested that the ruling party kept the proletariat complacent by constantly bombarding them with entertainment and superficial pleasures. The idea was that as long as their basic needs were met, they wouldn't question the deeper issues of control and oppression. And in 2024, it's hard not to see the parallels. We live in a world where celebrity gossip, viral challenges, and reality TV shows dominate our attention spans. A world where we're constantly being fed a steady stream of distractions, keeping us docile and complacent. But is it just harmless fun? Or is there something more sinister at play? Well, this is where things take a curious turn. Prediction 5, the erosion of truth. Okay, raise your hand if you've ever fallen for a fake news story or believed something that turned out to be completely false. Don't worry, we've all been there at some point. In the digital age, where information spreads like wildfire across social media and the internet, it's becoming increasingly difficult to separate fact from fiction. But this isn't just a modern phenomenon. It's something that George Orwell warned us about decades ago in his seminal work 1984. In this chilling portrayal of a dystopian society, Orwell introduced the concept of doublethink, the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs simultaneously and to accept both as the truth. On the surface, this might sound like a ludicrous idea, something that could only exist in the realm of fiction. But look around you. Look at the world we live in. We're witnessing a disturbing trend of truth being twisted, manipulated, and outright fabricated for the sake of political gain and social control. From alternative facts being peddled by those in positions of power to the rise of deepfakes and sophisticated misinformation campaigns, the line between reality and fiction is becoming increasingly blurred. And as Orwell warned us, this erosion of truth is a slippery slope that leads us down a dangerous path, a path towards the erosion of freedom itself. Think about it. If we can no longer understand the information we're being fed, if we can no longer distinguish between what is real and what's fabricated, how can we make informed decisions? How can we hold our leaders accountable? How can we exercise our fundamental rights and freedoms when the very foundation of truth upon which they rest has been eroded? And perhaps most terrifying of all, are we even aware of this happening right before our very eyes? Are we so accustomed to the constant barrage of misinformation and fake news that we've become desensitized to it? Have we simply accepted this distortion of reality as the new normal? If so, then we must heed Orwell's warning and wake up to the reality that we're living in. But that's not the end of it. There's something even more important that I forgot to mention. Prediction 6, the dangers of unchecked power. Alright, let's get real here for a second. Do you ever feel like the balance of power in our society is shifting in a dangerous direction? Like the people at the top are accumulating more and more control, while our liberties are slowly being eroded? In 1984, Orwell painted a chilling picture of a totalitarian regime that controlled every aspect of its citizens' lives, from their thoughts to their actions, their very existence. And while our world in 2024 may not be as extreme, we're seeing a concerning trend of power consolidation and the erosion of civil liberties in many nations around the globe. From the rise of authoritarian governments to the growing influence of corporate monopolies, the balance of power is shifting in ways that should give us all pause. But the real question is, are we doing enough to resist this trend? Or are we simply letting it happen, succumbing to the allure of convenience and the false promise of security? As we reflect on George Orwell's 1984, it's hard not to be both amazed and terrified by how accurate some of his predictions have become. From mass surveillance to the manipulation of language and truth, we're living in a world that breaks striking resemblances to his dystopian vision. And while technology has advanced in ways Orwell could never have imagined, the underlying themes of control, power, and the erosion of freedom remain as relevant as ever. As Orwell so eloquently warned, if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. So, what can we learn from this? Perhaps the most important lesson is to remain vigilant, to question the narratives we're fed, and to fight for the preservation of our fundamental rights and liberties. Because When we become complacent, when we allow our freedoms to be eroded in the name of security or convenience, we pave the way for the very dystopia that Orwell warned us about. It's up to us, as individuals,